False consciousness in psychology. False consciousness, and in general, the problem of how scientific psychology is something I have been interested about and writing about extensively for years. Actually, my psychology thesis is about the problem of lack of scientificity in psychology, in particular. One of the main issues I attach is the problem of false consciousness. And I just recently realized how it is connected with autism and its diagnosis and treatment, the way autistic people experience themselves and interact with other people, and the way we are treated by others, and the negative impact this has to in our mental health and life outcomes. A brief generic history of thought and psychology in particular, and the concept of false consciousness in particular. So the thing is, we tend to think that intellectual activity is something driven by reason and desire of discovery. And recent findings have proven this to be pretty much wrong. Our intelligence is actually a social tool. It's a tool we as a species have to maintain and create and build social bonds. So as it turns out, intellectual activity in the history of lifetime has been really one path to achieve status. So it's people coming up, sitting there, and well-educated, well-affluent people who have the opportunity to not work and just sit there and create theories. And then you will have their followers following them and creating this hierarchy where their followers are trying to become the new masters and everything and things like that. So it's always been more about that than it has been about actual research, actual study. This is why every society, even before the advent of modern medicine and everything, have cure for any disease. And so you will have, whether it is mental problems, depression, or something, whether it is infection, whether it is amputation or something, war injury. It's you will have had in every human society. You will have had the leader, the healer, who will give some administer some cure, and there will be this role play of the person being cured, which oftentimes do happen due to the placebo effect. And so you'll have this social role play of the figure of the healer and the figure of the patient, and their interchange and their positive or negative interactions, and this is a social role play which is intricate with the status of the healer itself. And why do we know this is that most of the time interventions that people had administered throughout human history towards a certain disease or God forbid mental health issues has been actually damaging to the patient. So it's been actually simply again a social status role play where the person giving the cure is there to receive an income, to receive praise by the society, and whether or not it actually works is like, who cares? This is why, with the advent of modern science, we have this. The basic thing that you're supposed to do is distinguish the social role play between an explanation that actually makes sense and has an effect. So, for instance, what we do is test for placebo effects, and we have control groups. So we'll have a group of people who is given a placebo, so something that just sugar pill or something that doesn't really do anything, and then you have a group of people who is given a hypothetical treatment. So say, okay, I made up a treatment about, this disease is caused by this virus, for instance, and then we are trying to do this medicine and see what happens, and then we'll have, is that just a social role play? Because that has an effect, and it's called the placebo effect, and we'll have that the people in the control group who are not given any treatment, if they're told they're given the treatment, they will improve. So you can have the social role play there of the healer coming and healing them. And for some people it will even work, for some people it won't, but that's not the point. But either way, you will have that the mechanism of how that works and the actual effectiveness of the cure is non-existent. So that's what science does, is we go to test whether or not are we doing a placebo, are we doing a social role play, or is actually something happening. And an example of actual intellectual stupidity that comes out from this social role play is my favorite example is Aristotle, so the greatest philosopher of the ancient world, and has been influential for almost 1,000 years, basically. And his genius involved some ideas such as that source of thinking is the heart, and the brain is basically just an organ that cools down the blood. And the most funny one is that women have less teeth than men, and you say, okay, how can you say something this preposterously stupid and actually be praised for that for centuries, and up to the point that there's this anecdote of when people in the Renaissance, so like almost 1,000 years after Aristotle, started to actually dissecting cadavers to to study the anatomy of people, and they will find that hey, the nerves actually, nerves are connected to the brain. They don't go into the heart; they actually go into the brain. There is an anecdote about one of the students saying, "Well, this argument sounds actually so convincing that if I didn't know for sure that Aristotle said otherwise, I'd believe it." So this shows, how powerful this social role play it is, oftentimes at expense of anything scientific, anything reasonable, anything logical. And the other example of about it is that this actually this famous Bertrand Russell quote, and Bertrand Russell is one of the philosophers who was promoting scientific thinking, critical thinking. And it shows this Aristotle example of women having less teeth than men, is that this actually shows how the human mind works. You can have somebody writing books about why their theory is right, and give you hundreds of pages of trying to persuade you of why it is true that women have less teeth than men, when he had 2 wives, and all he had to do to find out that he was being an idiot would be, oh, darling, can you open the mouth and can I count your teeth to see if what I'm saying actually makes any sense? And he never did, and his disciples never did, and that's how we ended up for centuries repeating these ideas which made absolutely no sense. And that's why you have people coming up with all sort of weird ideas which make no sense, and being repeated as something that's objectively true and absolute, and start war to defend it when it's like absolutely preposterous. So, now, when it comes to psychology and anthropology, there is a term actually for this, which is armchair anthropology, which is when the study of human societies and psychology, the study of human mind, has actually began historically. What you will have is these people sitting in their chairs and making theories about how the mind works, how human society works. And the term armchair anthropologist was actually coined by the first anthropologist to figure out that, hey, if we want to study other human societies, so people in far off islands and things like that. And this is the group which was called actually on-field anthropologists, such as people like Malinowski, for instance, who went to the Treobrand Island. And one of the first example of this anthropology done by actual research, and this had problems as well. Studying the human mind, studying human societies is complicated. But at least, the basic step one will assume is to have the person who say, oh, I want to study human societies, I want to study human mind, to go and have a look at what they study. And the term armchair anthropologist was coined by people like Malinowski, who took a voyage to meet people from this different population, and at least they made mistakes, and there are issues with what they did, but at least they took this first step of, well, let's go and try to see what's there. Kind of like with Aristotle, oh, darling, can you open just this basic test? Can you open the mouth and let me count your teeth just to see if there is at least some initial sense of I'm studying something instead of I'm making up things in my mind. And the term armchair anthropologist comes as opposition to what anthropologist has been always been before that, which was people never visiting a population. There was actually this was a statement of being pristine and pure, because their argument was, no, if we go there in that population, we will be affected by their culture and their stupidity, basically. And so if I do that, I actually go and take and travel and see how these people behave instead of making up bullshit in my mind. I would affect my super pristine intelligence and education and how much of a high status person I am by sitting here in my fancy chair, and that will be bad. So you will have these armchair anthropologists sitting in their armchairs and making up theories about people they never met, never visited, never bothered to interact with, and postulated, wrote books about how they behaved and things like that. Now, when it comes to psychology, this is something that has been going on over and over again. So it's been the term false consciousness itself actually comes from Engels, and who was one who with Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, and one of the founder of the theory of communism, and it was actually directly invoked to specify this hidden force, to explain why, if the communists were explaining how human mind worked, they were explaining the condition of the working population, why it was that people, philosophers sitting in the armchairs will be, oh, this is what the workers think, and the workers will be like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so false consciousness is basically this explicit postulation of, well, okay, what I say may not be substantiated by evidence. I'm talking about, say, somebody who has depression. I'm talking about somebody who is autistic. I'm talking about somebody who is Italian. And I don't really want to bother going there because, well, they're icky and whatever. But I still have to do this social role play of, I am so smart, I am treating them, I'm educating them, I'm better than them, and I have gaining everyone's praise of how good of a job I'm doing. And I can actually ignore everything they say. I don't need to interact with them. I don't need to know them. I'll be tainted by them if I touch them, but I can be here lecturing of what they think, what they do, how they behave. So this is a very pervasive problem in psychology, actually. Again, my thesis actually discussed this, and this is not the only problem we have in psychology, but it's a big one, and it affects a lot of things. For instance, one thing is feminist theory of violence against women and violence in general as a construct of the patriarchy, which again doesn't make any sense at all, and is based, okay, why for instance, one thing that if one looks at the data, it will see immediately that it actually doesn't make sense, because men are actually more likely than women to be assaulted, for instance, by far, and rates of domestic violence are actually pretty much the same between men perpetrators and women perpetrators. They are very much the same in same-sex couples. So this whole idea, the violence come up from the patriarchy and how men hate women, doesn't make basically any sense. And one of the way this is used to this is justified is the theory of false consciousness. Oh yes, men are abused at pretty much the same rate, but it just doesn't matter because we don't consider them, so we just ignore the data and we just focus on the women. So we can say violence against women happens only to women, which is kind of obvious, because if it happens to men, we don't count it obviously as violence against women. So we can say, this is a form of violence which is created by misogyny and only women experience, which is like, yeah, we're just making up a false consciousness argument of, well, we don't really care if it happens to you, so it's like you feel like you have experienced violence, but you feel like you have been assaulted, but I don't care, I'm better than you, I can ignore what you say, and so I can conclude that I have evidence that shows, oh, but actually, I'm the one who knows, you don't, so I conclude that you have not experienced violence. Now, in psychology, the main culprit for this, obviously, is Sigmund Freud, who is like the grandmaster of false consciousness psychology, which is this uh, postulating things and basically ignoring anything that the patient says, or even using what the patient says as evidence that, oh, I am so great, I am so smart, I am so wonderful, and writing books about how wonderful I am without ever having to listen. So one of the main theory which through Freud came into psychology is, for instance, repression and denial, which will postulate that, oh, say I am talking with a patient and they're telling me something that doesn't fit my worldview as the super grandmaster of psychiatry and the healer who knows things because I am so entitled and arrogant and fantastic. And so will be, oh, okay, I have this theory that you're thinking this, and the person goes like, what the fuck? This is like so completely preposterous. And it's like, oh, I see a lot of denial there. This shows me that I am right. So what these things creates is a way to basically completely. It's the same thing as the Aristotle's claim about women teeth or the nerves coming into the heart instead of the brain. You can be there sitting in your armchair, write 700 pages book without ever bothering to going to have a look at anything, and just make up story, publish them, have people cheer at you, have your disciples follow what you're saying and repeat what you're saying, and it's never going to make any sense at all. So this is a very generic problem in psychology, and I've wrote about this in connection to other things. I wrote about this in connection to violence. I wrote about this in connection about how is psychology a science, or what we can do to make psychology a science in general. I wrote about this in various life coaching activities about how we can have a more scientific, more logical understanding to improve our lives, because the same argument is applies pretty much everything, whether it's fitness, parenting, diets. You'll have people coming up with fat diets and fat parenting strategies and all these sort of things, and people will go crazy. Oh wow, and if I find this new thing and it really works, and they will have scientific data showing, no, this is complete bullshit, and people are like, no, but I tried and I know it works, and because of the placebo effect, so it's like, oh no, I feel it works, and then you will have the lecturer, my teacher, it says it works, and my teacher is so great. So again, you have this social role play of building up and working upon these theories, and it actually never really makes sense. So this is a very generic thing. That's why I have been writing extensively about critical thinking as a generic strategy in life, and of course, I am among those people who believe that psychology should be treated as a science. So when it comes to psychology, we shouldn't be doing this actively and promote this in academia. We should actually try to do science instead of doing Freud and Aristotle all over again, and writing books based on armchair theories. And I just recently realized it has actually a very deep connection with autism and the autistic spectrum, and it has a very practical impact on how people relate to the idea of how autistic people behave, autistic people themselves, on how they see themselves and how represented they are by mainstream media and psychology theory. And so that's what I'd like to discuss next.